Hey everybody, this is Let's Play 2025 April week 3 and I'm doing embellishing this week. Here's where I'm starting. After trimming it last week, I basted the trims that I'm going to stitch around the edges, and that's all I've got done other than the teddy bear. I'll be coming actually next. I'll put the whole clip of how I did the teddy bear in, and I'll be right back. Okay, here's the beginning of how I'm making my teddy bear. It's all an experiment, so if you're watching this, it worked. Okay, so what I did is I put my teddy bear drawing up on the window with some painter's tape, and then I put this thin cotton over it, and I traced all the elements. I knew that if I tried to get this design on the front of the terry cloth, I was never going to get it to work well. So the details are part of what's really makes him cute, so I knew I wanted to keep those. So what I did is, there's my front of the terry cloth. Like you can see, I cut it out of the washcloth. I did it with a pinked edge rotary cutter, and it's still losing some pieces, but it's actually not too bad. So I basted that thin cotton onto the back, what I want as the back, and I started doing a back stitch around the design in a slightly different blue to the washcloth so that I'd be able to see it through. And see, I'll stand up and see. You can kind of see where it is, and eventually when it's all done, I will clip the terry cloth all the way around, and I will clip the cotton slightly larger so that I can have a sort of seam allowance for the cotton to tuck under when I stitch it onto my background. And yeah, I have a plan. I have to experiment, but I have a plan on how to fill in these pieces that are to be slightly different colored, the snout. I'm thinking of using a blue flannel I have, so I will show you that when I get to that, but so far here's where I am. I've stitched that far around my teddy bear. Okay, here's how far I am. Isn't he cute? I did all the back stitching around. For the patches, I did do them in flannel. And how I did them is I put a piece of fabric, basted a piece of fabric over the area, and I back stitched tiny stitches around, using this as my stitch guide, but being careful when I went to the front to make sure the stitches were going where I would probably want them, like that they did, because your needle can be at different angles when you're pushing it through. So just to make sure I got the oval here and the oval here. And then with my little scissors, I clipped it really close to that stitching so you can see that it's raw edge, but should be fine. And then for the nose and the eyes, I was originally going to embroider them, but it occurred to me that I have these trims that work really well with little circles. So this little trim, this trim that I'm going to use for that wreath, I cut out one of the, I took the little center circle out of this one and used it for the nose. And then this trim again, I cut off. It's funny, this creating this that I've been doing, it's made me definitely think differently of trims and of fabrics, and I just looking at them different ways. Who thought of cutting up trims for elements. But yeah, though I took 2 of those for the eyes. I'll bring that back up to show you. And I just stitched them down. And I used embroidery floss to stitch the nose smile, the snout smile, I should say. For the ears, they turned out good. I'm pleased with all of it. I initially thought, and you can even see that I stitched it, I was going to stitch the stuffy stitching lines that I have on my quilts, and I did it in purple to reflect this, but it wasn't showing. As you can see, that the stem stitch that I did around, well, I should say that the back of, I've said this in another video, but I'll repeat it here because it's interesting, and actually I used it. The back of a back stitch is the stem stitch, and the back of a stem stitch is a back stitch. So for the outline, I did it on this side, it's stem stitch, but shows up as back stitch here. But I actually did the back stitch, like I stitched it from this side. But you can't really see it so much. So when I was doing I was just doing straight stitches, but when I was doing the stitching for the stuffies part, it wasn't showing up, and I wasn't liking it. So I've decided not to do those. For the dots on the toe spots on his feet, I'm going to do in the same color as the flannel. I'm going to do French knots, I believe. So he's ready to start trimming, and how I've thought about doing that, as I mentioned, I'm going to leave a seam allowance around the cotton, and I'm going to tuck it over and baste it down, and then I will cut as close as I can to the stitching of the terry cloth. And when I've completed that, I will come back and show you this really cute guy. All right, I finished the bear, and isn't he just adorable? I think he turned out just great. I did the French knots for the toes. I turned over all the under cotton edges and clipped on the curves so I could get it to come nice. I used a really loose weave for this, and that made this unravel, so the stitching wasn't as I had to back stitch a lot and stitch over a couple of times, but it worked out in the end. Then I clipped the terry cloth away a little bit out further than I wanted with a regular scissors, and then I've gone back in with my tiny scissors and clipped closer. Now I can see a couple places where I maybe clip a little more, but yeah, and then I will stitch like all of the stem stitches still around on his edge, and then the terry cloth is just slightly out from that, sort of just the same as this. And I will stitch to the stem stitch when I stitch him to the background of the piece. He way better than I expected. Okay, so I've got my piece here. Let's move the teddy bear drawing so you can compare them. Ta-da! Yeah, and he's gonna sit something like that. Adorable. Absolutely adorable. I'm not telling you to make a teddy bear, but the method of how I made this teddy bear shows you how you could make other designs by stitching from the back side. All right, I'll be back when I've embellished a little further. All right. I didn't get as much stitching done as I had hoped, but here's where I am at the end of this week's video. I did get all the edge trims stitched on. Let me show you. I used the Sorry, light's not very good. I don't have sunshine, but I have to get this video uploaded, so I have to do this now. Running stitch along here, which was fussier than I usually like to stitch, but the end result was lovely. And Teddy Bear got stitched down. He's so cute. He's adorable. And I've started to do the bunnies. I got 2 of them done. And as I was stitching, I was saying to myself, because I do, as you know, I wish I could do something extra to them to make them more than just 3 little flat bunnies. And then it occurred to me that I had some of this trim left over from, I used it in my bits and bobs. It's variegated, and it has the purple and the blue fuzzies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch a fuzzy on each of the tails. And that'll make it a bit of a little extra fun for them. I don't know, I'm changing my mind back and forth about the clothes here, but maybe. And one of the things I wanted to point out about that I put the teddy here and not here, like I had been saying, is it gives me extra, well, he just suited back on the back of the purple stripe better. It was funny. Originally I'd pictured him here. But that also, now I'm happy, it frees this fabric up, this section up, for me to do something to it. And then the baby blocks can go in here. So I'm pleased with that. Okay, I will have, I'll see you next week with more. I finish it off next week. Thanks for watching.